Hey, Trans here. You guys are gonna like this one. For a long time, I've had intentions on making an arena defense guide. Finally, I've gotten around to making it for y'all. In the past, I've searched far and wide on YouTube, on Google, but to no avail in finding the things you need to know to crafting the perfect arena defense in one concise spot. But look no further, as this day has finally come, as I got you all's back. Before I get into the video, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you found this video helpful, share it with your clanmates or friends as it will help the channel grow, but most importantly, help your friends or your clanmates improve the arena game also. Let's not dwindle any further and let's get into the guide. Alright, so I'll be honest, arena defense is a complex topic and it took quite some time for me to consider how to present this information in a way that is most easily understood. I decided that the best way was to start by breaking down the separate components of what constitutes a strong arena defense and explain them individually. So from my experience, there are 8 main components, and they're as follows, and they're in no particular order of importance. They are forcing of immunity, pressing speed, threat, stall, RNG, shield, reviver, and finally, sustainability. As you can probably tell, this is quite a long list, and the truth is that you cannot cover every single component in a well-synergized and functional defense. I like to think of it as a leaking ship, having more holes than you have fingers to plug. No matter what holes you choose to plug, water will still leak into the ship, and this analogy applies to arena defenses. There is no defense which cannot be beaten by a well-built counter. So don't feel bad if your defense doesn't perform well during a reset, just go back to the drawing board and revise. Let's first talk about forcing immunity. The idea behind forcing immunity is that you force your opponent into opening with a block debuff champion, bring a cleanser, or have their entire team in immunity. This will make it so that one slot in their offense team is eaten up by a champion that is either a predictable opener, such as Sifi, or if they bring a cleanser such as Skytouched, they will no longer be speed tuned. Or if they have everyone in immunity, the stats of every unit is crippled due to the loss in stat bonuses due to the 4-piece immunity set. There are 2 main champions which fill this role. One is Tormund and the other is Hegemon. Tormund's passive hinders buffing by applying a freeze, while Hegemon's ability to attack first with his AoE skill to lock out champions forces a cleanser or forces a full immunity setup. There are also what I call pseudo options, which force immunity on the attacker. These are Urgo and Krisk. Urgo can apply a freeze debuff on attacker when enough damage is sustained, and Krisk can apply an attack down on the attacker when hit. These debuffs, upon hit, can mess up an offense combo and hinder the use of a Savage Nuker and force immunity on the attacker. The next component is forcing speed. Contrary to belief, at least for defense, speed is king and will always be. If your defense can go first, you have immediate control and opponent is immediately at your mercy. The main options are Arbiter, Lysandra, and Sifi. All 3 of them help set off a defense combo chain if your defense wins the speed race, and prevent untuned speed offense teams from having a good shot against you. Valkyrie here is what I consider a helper, as her passive, which knocks down turn meter for each buff placed on an enemy champion, will help your defense cut in if not already faster than the offense team to begin. Always try and speed tune your defense if you run a fast defense. Next, we have the threat options. You generally always want at least one form of threat on your defense to generate a win from your defense against your opponent, because there will be players who do not care if certain pure stall defenses take a long time to win, but they know they can win for sure. Having a threat unit will prevent persistent players from doing this. Warlord here is pretty self-explanatory, as the moment he gets his increased cooldowns A3 off, it's essentially a done deal for securing a defense victory. Urgo, on the other hand, stops go second offense teams, as he is a stripper with a very clutch freeze, and he can be built to one-shot units on his extra turn. Also, building him in Swift Parry can give your team a chance to revive after surviving a nuke, and when he gets his strip freeze off, he can turn the tide entirely. Candrafon and Mountain King are just force affinity damage dealers, which make Trunda offense's life miserable, as they can easily survive due to weak hits and then retaliate to knock out enemy nukers. Then there are what I call pseudo options again. Kymar, when the AI patch comes out and you make him prioritize his sleep skill. The skill alone will mess up offense teams, as it's only a 3-turn cooldown and the sleeps will easily allow you a chance to let your threat unit take a turn on your defense. Mortu here is also nice if he's built in Swift Parry and he survives while activating his Peril secret skill. Peril can snipe out a unit on the opponent team while blocking Revive, and if he targets the enemy nuker, you immediately win as there's no more damage output left on the opponent's team. I classified Mortu as a pseudo option because he doesn't always target Trunda due to affinity disadvantage, and his Peril skill is at a very low rate of activation, so he's not as reliable. Lastly, Madame, if she gets her strip off, it will weaken the opponent so much that along with the fear she places in between her turns with her A2, it can mess up an offense team entirely and render it unable to beat your defense. Stall options are next on the list. These are there essentially to make your opponent's time longer when attacking you. Torment is self-explanatory, as his revive means you have to kill him all over again, which on average could mean 5 to 10 second longer battles because of the damage mitigation from his freeze debuff upon revival. Valkyrie, on the other hand, can cause huge delays if her counterattack buffs aren't stripped and animations come in between attacks. I included some sub-options as well, as I didn't want to make it look like the only viable options here are S-tier legendaries. The Revive on Death, with unkillable and block damage from Bushi and Basilisk, respectively, can act the same way as Torment in delaying an attacker's battle. So RNG isn't really determined by an individual champion, with the exception of Valkyrie. Her passive, having an accuracy check when opponent's unit's buff, can throw the turn order of strict nuke combos off. That aside, the main supply of RNG is of course Swift Parry sets and reaction accessories. The more Swift Parry and reaction you have on your champions, the better, so naturally, long-term players would have an advantage in this aspect. But, as you continue to do well on your clan versus clan battles, and finish in plat every week, you will eventually collect enough pieces to be comparable to even the veteran arena players, as there are diminishing returns on improving stats with this tier. Now for shield champions. The reason why you want to have at least some form of shield on your defense is to prevent Nuke Hegemon offenses from easily killing you with a Lydia, and preventing revive afterwards, as there is enough top accounts out there now that double Nuke Hegemons is a common offense team. That aside, it will give you extra sustain on high resistant built revivers, as you expect to resist the strips on them so that they retain the shield. Otherwise, you can expect shields to easily just get stripped, as nobody really in their right mind goes headfirst against heavy shield defenses. Here, I won't explain all of the individual shield units, as their kits and strengths is well known by this point, and depending on their ability to cover other components of an arena defense, you can make your choice to maximize the synergy. The champions I classified as sub-options here are either because their kit doesn't bring a lot to the table, or that they are easily countered if your opponent is knowledgeable. Revivers are your bread and butter. Most top defenses in Platinum Arena have 2 revivers, as it gives a very reliable chance for you to bounce back from an attack and potentially pull off a victory from the bounce back. Definitely for this case, you most definitely want to build your revivers in Swift Parry, as it's the strongest build in the current meta and causes the most problems for attackers. The main options are self-explanatory again, as they are well-known champions, but I do want to highlight that Cardinal is a very powerful champion, as her ability to revive an entire team at full turn meter allows an instantaneous bounce back that no other champion, even legendaries for this matter, can do. The rest of the sub-options are either not friendly with AI, even with the AI patch. I find either their base stats aren't enough, or their revive isn't enough to really put them at the top. It's a shame because I think Ursula has the most powerful revival skill, as Strengthen, Defense Up, and Turn Meter upon revival is a legendary level. But the fact that the skill is also considered a buff also, she will waste the skill as soon as she gets her first turn, even if no allies are dead. Even with the AI patch, there is no way to make her save her revive skill until all the allies are dead, which makes her far less reliable. The same goes for Yugo, as her revive skill is also classified as a heal. The rest, being Godseeker, Kaiden, and Rector, I find just don't really make the cut to be considered top. But if you're limited in options, they are by no means bad. The last component is sustainability. These champions are meant to hinder AoE nuke options against your defense, as stripped nuke offenses are the most common type as it's the fastest, and being able to give that offense option a hard time can grant you a high defense victory rate. These champions have either passives which negate damage from allies like Ursuga and Helior, or reduction to AoE damage from Duchess, or massive healing from Bogoth, or ally protections from Necrit or Krisk. As for the sub-options, Seeker applies defense up on everyone upon being hit with a critical, so it essentially negates defense down from Madame's. And Sandlash, with her sudden ally protect when one of your allies drops below a certain HP threshold, can keep your team alive and from dying from AoE attacks. If you don't recognize the champion in the middle of the sub options, that's a rare dwarf called Master Butcher. He has a passive very similar to Vogoth, and his base stats aren't that bad also. On top of this, he also has a passive revive, so he's a solid choice for a rare. But the only thing that, unlike Vogoth, is that his heal skill has a 1-turn cooldown, so it isn't as reliable as Vogoth, being a consistently active passive. So for that reason, I think that's why you don't see him being used at all in Platinum Arena, as it's hard to keep him taking turns for his heal passive to be active. Now that all the components have been covered, you will notice that there are champions that cover multiple components, which make them into the meta champions you see in defenses today. Try and choose champions that are meta when crafting your defense, even if you find it lame to use the same thing that others are using, as success is what you should be aiming for in a defense. In the past, I've tried to make out-of-the-box defenses, and it can really cause you to have a terrible reset if it doesn't perform as well as you imagine. After brainstorming a team, you can use this list as a checklist to see if you've covered as many of these aspects as possible. And now for some bonus content. When tailoring your defense, it's best to consider things from the attacker's perspective. Being able to visualize in the shoes of the opponent in attacking your own defense will help you gauge the strength of your defense. If you can see yourself having a hard time attacking your own defense with these 3 main offense types, chances are other people will also. So in helping you doing this, I have thought of 3 main offense types that I encounter in Platinum Arena. These 3 offense types do not encompass all the types of offenses used in Platinum Arena, and there are many variations of these combos, but these here will offer enough of a range to judge your defense synergy and how foolproof it is. These 3 offense types are Nuke Hege teams, Double Rotos teams, and Madame Trunda teams. I'll include a list of the components of a defense you want to aim for to counter each of these individual offense types. So beginning with the Nuke Hege offenses, most of them either use some type of attack or crit lead, paired with Lydia, and their goal is to use 2 or 3 Hegemon to snipe out most of everyone on your defense, and then use Lydia to block any revive attempts afterwards. Since Hegemon is bound to go first, the only counter here is to rely on a shield to prevent death from the Hegemons. Have 2 revivers to allow you to bounce back if some units die, and even if Lydia blocks the revive on one of them, sustainability to prevent Hegemon from killing anyone, or have a ton of swift parry and or reaction to prevent death. If you can survive the Nuke Hege initial hits, then you have immediately won. Nuke Hege offenses are instant gratification or instant disappointment. If you can survive, you give them instant disappointment. Alternatively, you can also put a fast, crowd control Hegemon of your own on your defense, and rarely will you see that someone who attacks with Hegemon will try to do a Hegemon speed race, so that will deter Hegemon from being used against your defense. Double Rotos offenses are, I'd argue, to be the hardest to counter. From my experience, having massive shields combined with multiple revivers and ally protect or share damage from sustainability champions will make Rotos offenses take much longer, as double Rotos teams do not have a stripper generally, so they will hit a brick wall against thick shields and ally protect. Since Rotos offenses are a go second base team, you want to use speed to your advantage in your defense and apply a threat first, such as using Warlord to increase everyone's cooldown. It's important to know that Warlord is the only champion which will hinder Rotos well, as his cleansing, when paired with Siphi, make any debuff style threats useless. You'd also want to pair some form of a fast and low damage AoE attacker, such as Krisk or Tormund, to slowly damage the Rotos without proccing his passive, as to avoid giving him a free turn. After that point, if your defense is quick enough with a Warlord and you have enough sustain, you can keep the opponent's Siphi locked out so she cannot revive, and when the Rotoses die, then it's immediately game over for them. Of course, having swift parry would help you here as well. And finally, there is the classic Madame Trunda offenses. These are the most common offense type you'd expect to see hit your defense always, so if you're limited in defense options, I'd make a reliable counter to strip nuke offenses first. A shield unit on your defense against this offense doesn't make any difference, as you'd expect to be stripped. This is why the meta currently is Guardian set for Ursuka for sustain instead of a shield Ursuka. Also, as lots of people still run very fast speed arbiters, you'd want to force immunity where possible so that you can immediately have a speed advantage. as you prevent opponents from using these speed arbiters. Using the speed advantage, you can counter these offenses by outspeeding your opponent by pressing speed and applying a threat before your opponent can go. Alternatively, if you opt for a slower base setup with reaction and swift parry, you can count on using a combination of sustain and reviving to bounce back after your opponent goes. Reaction accessories on your sustain champions with swift parry on your revivers will make a massive difference in surviving the blow of a Madame Trunda offenses in cases where your defense gets outsped. And that wraps up the guide. At the end of the day, testing your defenses with your clanmates and friends will give you the best indication of success during reset. Good luck with crafting your perfect defense, and I'll see you on the battlefield during a reset soon. WAN Trans out.